We're going to start this puppy up. Clear? Prop.
And welcome back to Tip of the Week. This week we're going to install the jury struts. Now, if you're not familiar with what jury struts are, it'll become very evident very soon. Let's get to it. Now, as you can imagine, the struts, both forward and rear, are very important for keeping the wings on, keeping them from folding up or falling down. And that's just the issue. These tubes are very strong when it comes to tension or pulling apart, so they do a great job for the wing, keeping the wing from flopping up. Now, when it's sitting on the ground, the pressure of the wing is down or compressing the strut. And being a tube, if you push too hard or try to compress a tube, you know that it could kink or buckle. And another issue is the repeated up and down force from the wings lifting the plane and then settling down, or in turbulent conditions, that stress of tension and compression is going on all the time, and not just the failure of the strut, but also the vibration of the pulling and pushing, and then it's going through the air and shaking in all sorts of directions. So we simply need a way to stabilize the strut tube, primarily to keep it from buckling when it's in compression. And we solve that problem, you probably noticed on virtually every single high wing plane, is that we have some additional supports, in this case some thin tubes, that will go between the spar at the top and the strut down below to keep the strut from buckling or moving anywhere outside of its normal straight position. So we need to do that for the front and the rear. And in addition, from going between the spar and the strut, we also want to tie the rear and front struts together, so we will run a horizontal member to keep them from pulling in or out. So it just ties everything together, basically with some triangulation, to keep these spars, these struts, in place. So if we go to our plans, we're going to find out exactly where to place these jury struts, which is what it's called, the members that tie the spar to the main struts. Now, looking at the plans, it asks us to place our jury strut 49 inches from our strut attach bolt. So I measured along the spar 49 inches, and that came to right here. In fact, it's 1 inch beyond our connecting bolt for the cross member we put in previously. So I have a mark here, and what I want to do is imagine a straight line, and I'll use my level to make sure I find it, a straight line until it intersects the strut. And I will put a line there. And these 2 points is where our front or forward jury strut is going to be located. 49 inches and then straight down till it intersects the strut. So here's another look at those positions. Here's my 49-inch mark on the main spar, and using a level, I'm going to create a straight edge all the way down, and where it intersects the strut, I'm going to put another mark. And those 2 marks are where our jury strut is going to be located. Now we are at the rear of the plane looking forward. We have to make the same marks on the rear spar. So right here, 1 inch beyond our connecting bolt, at the 49-inch mark, I placed a mark, so that's 49 inches, and then using a level coming straight down or a plumb bob, we need to locate that same point on the rear strut. And even though this strut angles in, we still want basically a straight line down and mark it. So this will be the location of the rear jury strut between this point and this point. Now, for our horizontal jury strut, the one that spans from the front strut to the rear strut, we're simply going to use that same point on both of the struts and send it forward to the forward strut. So our job is to fabricate 3 pieces of jury strut. One that's going to go between the rear spar and the rear strut. One piece that's going to go forward to the forward strut. And then our last piece will go from the forward strut up to the forward spar. So that's 3 pieces. 3 pieces of our 1/2-inch tubing. This is the same material we used for our ribs. So that makes it convenient. Now, we basically need to come up with a secure attaching method to attach this to the spar and to the jury strut. Let's take a look at that. Now, credit for this attachment method that I'm going to use goes 100% to Terry Adair, who's completed his Affordaplane, and he's probably out flying right now. But I notice he used this method of the hinges. Here is our aileron hinge, but the idea is to just separate them so that the tube can go inside, and that makes it very secure and kind of universal way to attach a tube. So that's the direction I'm going. Let's take a look at some of the details here. So if this is our jury strut, we can attach it using these stainless steel angles, the same ones you've been using all along, and we just need to space them appropriately so that it takes the thickness of the 1/2-inch tube. Now, this is what I've come up with here. Take the 2 angles, and here's the quiz for the day. How many AN washers does it take to take up the space of a 1/2-inch? And if you guessed 8, you are correct. Each AN washer is a 1/16 of an inch, so 8/16 comes up with our half. So basically I have 8 washers and a bolt, a temporary bolt, inside with the nut. And what this will do is space it just right for a 1/2-inch tube. Very nicely. So I'm going to place this on the jury strut and the spar with the washers in place so that I can have a very nice spacing while marking the holes and then drilling for rivets that are going to hold this on. Of course, we will end up drilling a hole in the tube, the jury strut, and using a small 3/16 bolt to fit inside of here. We are located at the front strut, and we definitely want to drill and set up our first attachment point on the front strut, not the rear. The rear strut is at quite an angle, and that needs to be done second. Here is our attaching mechanism, looks like our hinge, and the idea is to place the center here, right like this, so it's centered on our 49-inch mark. I want a straight line down the middle, so I'm going to use a piece of angle here just to help get a straight line. Okay. And that way we can get this aligned properly. I'm going to use just the end holes of each piece. We don't need the middle. And I'm going to use 3/16 rivets in here. So basically I'm going to mark my 4 holes, remove it and punch it, and then go ahead and drill. We can finish the other 2 holes. So I have placed a 1/2-inch tube in our front slot and have let it basically just set on the rear strut. We're going to look for our line, and notice it may bend just a little bit. But come take a look at the angle between this jury strut and this rear strut. Now we're looking down at the rear strut and the jury strut that has come back from the front. And there's our line. So it's going to end up here. Now, I'm not sure you can see it because of the camera angle, but there's quite an angle here. In other words, these are not at 90 degrees as we might like. And what that means is when we put our attachment brackets on, they're going to be spread apart a little bit wider. So I'm going to add another 2 washers to give us another 1/8 of an inch to take advantage of the requirement that that angle is going to require more space in there. So I'll go ahead and set this up with 10 washers in between, and then make my line and build it the same way. And then we'll cut this to proper length when we're all done. Okay, now we want to trim this off at both ends. We need to leave a 1/2 inch between the center of the hole and the edge where we cut it off. And once we do that, then we'll go and drill a hole so we can insert a small bolt into each end. With the horizontal jury strut trimmed, we can go ahead and mark for drilling through the tube. I placed a center line to make it easier to mark and drill. And we're going to drill up to a 3/16 hole for an AN3 bolt. And here's our final connection at the front strut using this bolt. Now we need to add the vertical jury strut from this point up to the top spar. We're going to make our connection 1 inch back from the bolt right here. And basically it's going to attach here. We will build a bracket and then attach it to the top spar. Here's our position, 49 inches from the strut connection. So we're going to build an attachment bracket here up at the top, right at the bottom of the main spar, and then build a bracket down where it meets the horizontal jury strut. So looking underneath the main spar at our 49-inch mark, this is where the vertical tube needs to end up. So we're going to use one of our 8-washer connection assemblies and rivet this on in place. With our brackets in place, riveted underneath the front spar, we can now take and create our jury strut with a piece of 1/2-inch tube. We need to first mark the center line on both sides and then insert it, and then we'll drill a hole through it. And of course this needs to come straight down and touch our horizontal piece that we put in previously. And here's the final result. We have a bolt going through, and then when we come down, we want to mark a spot 1 inch back from where the bolt is located and cut this so that it just clears the top. and we will build a bracket that will hold this in place against the horizontal piece here. So for now we are going to move on to the back and repeat what we did at the back. Add another bracket. Now what is a little different about the rear is that the rear strut, as you notice, does not travel underneath the rear spar. It goes inward to connect down to the fuselage. So that means our bracket needs to be adjusted accordingly. So here's our horizontal jury strut, and we're going to go from this point up to our number 49 mark on our rear spar, and so you notice the angle, and so that just means we're going to put our hinge bracket to match up with this angle. Here is underneath the rear spar, and there's my number 49-inch mark. So instead of going vertical like we did on the front, I'm going to rotate it around so that it aims right directly towards the horizontal jury strut. And here's the hinge bracket installed. I could have tilted it at a little more of an angle, but that's okay. And then it comes down and meets our horizontal. I've made a mark an inch from the bolt and then cut this at an angle just so it's right above it. And we will build a bracket for this just like we will for the front. And so I'll go ahead and drill my hole through the bracket like we did before. Now let's make the straps to hold our verticals to the horizontals. I'm going to use some flat aluminum stock. I'm using 63 thousandths. Now you could use something a little thicker like 90 thousandths or something a little bit less, but this is what I chose. It's about the right thickness. And I cut a strip 3/4 of an inch wide, and then I'm going to divide it up into 2-inch pieces. And I'm going to, of course, cut them apart. And then, and it might be easier to do this before you cut it apart, not a big deal, is to draw a line down the center. And then we're going to talk about some hole locations that we're going to drill. In addition to the line down the center, we want to mark a location for some holes. And all these holes are basically 3/8 from the edge. 3/8 from this edge, 3/8 from this edge, etc. And then one hole is going to be centered between the 3/8 holes on either side. So each pair is going to be identical with 3 holes in them each. I'm going to go ahead and drill my holes and then cut them apart. And here's with the holes drilled. I didn't mention the size. So this is a 3/16 hole, 1/8 inch, 1/8 inch, 3/16 hole, 1/8 inch, 1/8 inch. Now I will cut these apart and we'll have 2 identical straps. The 2 1/8 inch are going to be used with rivets and the 3/8 with a small AN3 bolt. We're at our front strut, and here's the jury strut, the horizontal one that we installed previously, and here's the vertical jury strut we left hanging from before. Now the first step is to mark everything carefully, because, and the way this is going to work is, here is our strap that we fabricated. The large hole is going to match up with the hole we're going to drill on the horizontal, and then the smaller holes will go into our vertical. So the very first step is to make sure we have our line here, which is 1 inch from the bolt, and that sets the center of the vertical jury strut. And then the small horizontal line here is the high point of this tube where we're going to drill. And remember, if you're having trouble finding where that should be, you can take a ruler and scratch that in, as long as you hold this parallel to your vertical and scratch that in. So we'll drill out our hole at that intersection. We're going to mark the other side also, because we want the hole to come out at the right spot, and then also a line along our vertical. And again, easiest way is to hold a ruler parallel to here, and you can find the high point with the scratch that way, because that line will be useful for when we try and line everything up and put our rivets in. So I'm going to go ahead and drill our 3/16 hole through our intersection here and then on the other side of it. And here's our hole. And now I'm going to take one of our straps and then we can put the strap on the other side and a temporary nut. And now I've tightened it up slightly. I can still move it, and I will slip the vertical and line it up with our line that goes down the center, and then check the rear for the same thing. And once we got everything looking real nice, I'm going to go ahead and mark and punch and then drill a pair of 1/8 inch holes on one side, cleco, and then do the same on the other side. And these will get then 4 1/8 inch rivets to hold this tube on. And a clamp ensures that when you're drilling, nothing moves until you get those clecos in there. And there is our finished product. Now, obviously, I'll get the proper bolts eventually and nuts, but that makes a very nice secure connection from our vertical to our horizontal jury strut. And now we need to perform the same operation back at the rear. Here is the rear. Of course, we have this angle, but that doesn't change anything. Our 3/16 hole is 1 inch from this bolt over here. Make sure to mark both tubes. And then when we get the lines lined up, we go ahead and drill with 4 rivets. And here's the rear jury strut connection finished. And eventually we have to get the right bolts and nuts in place to finish it off. And the front. And here you can see all 4 corners. And when looking from the front, they line up. And that should conclude the jury strut assembly. One more wing to go. So everyone, please, back to building. We will catch you next time.